Welcome to Study Time, a televised home learning program produced by Rwanda Education Board.
Hello, welcome students to TV learning programs. I'm teacher Julius as usual, and today I'll be with the senior 4 entrepreneurship class, and we are still on our unit 6, which is market research. And our today's title, we are going to see, our today's lesson, we are going to see methods of data collection, or how we can collect information while carrying out market survey or market research, and the steps that must be followed in conducting or carrying out market survey. So this will be our today's lesson, or this is what we are going to talk about. So in the previous lessons, learners, remember, we talked about many things. We talked about what market survey is, the process of collecting, recording, and analyzing market-related data so that you obtain useful information. So now, if you are conducting or if you are collecting data or information, which methods do you use? How can you collect information? These are the methods that we are going to talk about. So at the end of this lesson, I expect you to be able to know the research methods or the research instruments, how data can be collected using which methods. So these are the methods that we are going to talk about. And you should be able to know the steps in the process of carrying out market research or market survey. So let us go to our method number 1, methods of data collection, where we have the questionnaire, So when we talk about the questionnaire, so one of the methods, one of the methods used in data collection, we have through the questionnaire or using the questionnaire. So now what is a questionnaire? You must note the spelling here, N-A-I-R-E, how it is written. So what is a questionnaire? From the word question. So with a questionnaire, how is this method applied? Here, the researcher, or in this case, the entrepreneur, designs questions on a paper, puts questions on a paper, and of which these questions are given to respondents or target population. Who are respondents? The respondents, in this case, in research, this is the target population, where you expect to get the feedback or the responses. The target population or the respondents here will answer those questions. So the questions that you design in this questionnaire should be based on what you want, what you are researching about. And remember here, in this case, we have a closed questionnaire and an open questionnaire. So remember, if you are designing a questionnaire in order to collect information from your customers or from your target population, at least try maybe to use open-ended questions. The open-ended questions will allow you to extract more information from the target population. So closed questions, for them you may not be able to get more explanation, more information from your customers. So with a questionnaire, you design questions on paper, then you give them to respondents. Then they give you the answers of those questions. So that is questionnaire, method number 1. Then we have method number 2, which is interviews, through interviews. So what does this one now involve? How is this method used? In most cases, it involves 2 participants, the interviewer and the interviewee. The interviewer, this is the researcher. The interviewer, and then we have the interviewee, double E. So here, this may be the researcher or the entrepreneur in this case. The researcher, who's an entrepreneur, trying to ask questions. And here, this will be the respondent, the target person or the target population responding to the questions asked by the researcher or the interviewer. And in this, with the interviewing, In most cases, it's always face-to-face interaction. Face-to-face interaction. So the respondent, the one answering the questions, and it is always orally in most cases. It is always orally. So the interviewing method, as a method of collecting information from the target population, it has many advantages. Likewise, here using the questionnaire has also advantages and disadvantages. But with interviewing here, you are able to get more clarification from the respondent. Maybe he or she has answered the question, has answered something and you are not understanding it well. So you as the researcher, you may ask for clarification, or you may ask the interviewee to give you more information about what you have asked. So through interviewing is a very good method of collecting information from the targeted population. From the targeted population. So it involves an entrepreneur or a researcher asking questions to the targeted population, and they give answers. And I've said in most cases here, it is face-to-face interaction. Two participants in most cases. Two participants in most cases. So that is using the interviewing method, or through interviews. Through interviews. Then we have number 3, which is observation. Method number 3, which is observation. Observation method. So with observation method, the researcher or the entrepreneur uses his naked eyes to monitor the purchasing habits of his customers towards his products. So you can use your eyes and you extract information, you observe something, and then you get information from your customers. Here, you may also observe, maybe customers come to buy your products. Your competitors there, you might be like 4 sellers. Someone comes, you are seller A, he or she looks at your products, then he leaves them, then buys for maybe seller B. So you have to ask yourself questions. Why? I have same products like his, but customers are leaving mine. Then you have to ask yourself very many questions. Are they of poor quality? Are my prices very high? So here you use your eyes to monitor the purchasing habits of your customers towards your business products. So observation, you use your eyes. It has its advantages and disadvantages. Because sometimes you may observe, when it comes to disadvantages, you may observe something and you interpret it poorly. Or what you have observed, maybe it is not true, or the way you think it is. Then we have consumer panels. Using the consumer panels. Who is a consumer? A person, a business that uses final goods and services. The final use of goods and services. The one who uses finally the goods manufactured is a consumer. Now, so with consumer panels, a panel is a group of people. So this involves organizing customers in marketplaces or in an organized area. And then you use a survey guide. A survey guide. This may be in the form of a questionnaire to collect data from them or from these consumers. So in this case, when you put your customers, when you organize your customers in marketplaces, or maybe in a given organized place, then you may use a survey guide to collect data from them. And in this case, the survey guide may be having some of the questions which you ask these customers, and then they give the answers or the responses. So those are consumer panels. Then you have test marketing. Test marketing. This may be experimentation, test marketing, or through experiments, test marketing. So with test marketing, it involves selling a product in a given area in order to assess consumers' reactions on it. So here, if you are manufacturing maybe juice, you are the manufacturer of juice. You have just started a factory. Then you have produced. Here you may take samples, the public, and they buy. Then you get opinions, you get reactions. What will be the reactions of the public towards your product? They say maybe your juice is too sugary. Maybe it's not sweet. So then in that case, you'll be able to get responses from the targeted population or from that very area where you have taken your products for testing, experimentation. In this case, you'll be able to get information regarding your products, and therefore maybe you can get areas where you can change, or maybe if you have taken your products for testing, reactions may be, maybe your product is of small size, try to increase the size. Maybe the color is not really good. In this case, you may try, or they may suggest the suitable colors that you may use on your product. Maybe they may say the scent of your product is not all that nice. Then in this case, you may say, which ingredients can I use to change the scent of my product? Maybe the design. In this case, you have extracted information from the public, but using what you call test marketing. Taking your products in a given area to sell them, and then you get or you tap customer reactions towards your products. All these methods can help you to gather information from the target population. So these are research instruments or research methods that are used in data collection. Remember, data, the information collected from the targeted population. So, and when we talk about the population in this case, we don't mean the population of of geography, the number of people living in an area. No. In research, when we talk about targeted population, it can be items or people, but of which you want to know some characteristics, some information. In this case, your target population, you want to know some information about those people or maybe items. So that will be your target population. That will be your target population. So when you are carrying out, when you go to collect data from the field, then you have to use these methods. And then with the questionnaire, sometimes you may carry out what you call a pilot study or piloting study. A piloting study, you take a questionnaire for testing. It has some advantages, because in this case, you will know how long does it take for a respondent to answer this questionnaire. A pilot study. And the pilot study should be done almost in a target population. In the target population, such that you see if you can get similar responses. If maybe a pilot study will help you to correct some errors. Like if the questionnaire, the respondent have taken a lot of time answering it, then you may reduce on the questions. So pilot study is very important, piloting study. So you may use 2 or more methods to see the reliability, to test the reliability of these research instruments. See if they can give same results, the consistency, what the questionnaire is giving you, and the interviews or interviewing, the information, is it relating? Is there some correlation, some similarity? So those are the methods that we use while collecting information or data. Throughout the research methodology, these are research methods that you may apply. Mostly the questionnaire, the interviews. They are mostly used in research methodology. So let's go to steps in carrying out market survey or market research. So these steps are very important. They must be in order. That's one thing. They must be in order. You don't mix up them. So step number 1, we have finding the research topic. What do you want to research about? Finding the research topic. So what is the research topic here in this case? So the research topic must be relevant. This involves a researcher finding out the work that has to be done in the field. For example, we have an example of our research topic, the influence of advertising on business growth. We have 2 things, the influence of advertising and business growth. That is your topic. The influence of advertising the influence of advertising on business growth. On business growth. On business growth. So in research, the topic must be having two important things, what we call the dependent variables and an independent variable. So in this case, learners, you may tell me what is the dependent variable and what is an independent variable for your topic to be really very good. So we want to establish the influence of advertising on business growth. So what is the dependent variable here and what is the independent variable? One must be depending on the other. In this case, it means that advertising influences business growth. And therefore, business growth depends on advertising. Here, in this case, when you're examining these two variables, business growth depends on advertising. Therefore, business growth becomes a dependent variable, and advertising becomes an independent variable because it influences a dependent variable. So an independent variable influences a dependent variable. So your topic must at least be having these two things. So you have to find out the topic of the research. Then you define the research problem. So a research problem is a research question. This will help you to have your research relevant or not to go astray of the research. A research problem, what do you want to solve? Remember, we said the research is a systematic process of finding solutions to questions or to problems. In research, a research question is a research problem. So this is where an entrepreneur defines what he wants to find, out in the research study. And in this case now, how do you set the question? This has been our topic. Now, step number 2, you define the research question, the research problem. This is what you call now statement of the problem in research. Now, how do you state it? How does, for example, how does advertising affect or influence business growth? Business growth. Or how does advertising attract customers? So here you may set 2 or 3 or 5 research questions. And therefore, in your field, when you go to collect information, you must not go astray these questions. So that is what you call a research question. How does, for example, step number 2, how does advertising attract customers? How does advertising maybe lead to business growth in this case? So then from there, you set what you call you define or you set objectives, of which these objectives should be specific, of general objectives and specific objectives. So what do you want to achieve at the end of this research study? These research objectives must be based on research questions. For example, if you have 4 research questions, then you must set 4 research objectives. Now we are using now the research language. So when you have 4 research questions, then make sure the research objectives are also 4 in most cases. They must be in relation relating to the objectives. For example, we have to see if our research question was, how does advertising influence business growth? Then the research objective should be, by the end of, or to find out or to examine the extent to which advertising attracts customers. So you must note this, how you can state the research objectives. Objectives in research, we state them beginning with 2. To what extent? To examine the extent at which advertising attracts customers. That will be your research objective. Remember, we have extracted it from the research question or the research problem. If there are 4 research problems, make sure you generate 4 research objectives. Then we continue to determine what you call the scope. The scope. This is where the researcher determines the boundaries of his study, areas to be covered, the limitations of the research, areas to be covered and the time. For example, the research or your research, you need to conduct it maybe in one of the sectors. the scope of the study. Determine the areas to be covered in your research. Then we have determining the clear plan on how to conduct data collection. In this case, now you plan. Which methods am I going to use? What financial resources do I need? Here you need to plan. For example, if you have a journey, you have to plan. How much money will you need? Which travel documents will you need? Maybe how many clothes should you go with? So therefore here, you have determined the scope of the research study, the areas to be covered. Now plan. And in your plan, there are things that must be there. For example, which methods will you use to collect the data? The research instruments. Will I use the questionnaires? How many questionnaires should I print out? Interviews. Which maybe devices will I use? Do I need cameras? Do I need microphones? So here you plan. How much money do I need to use? The manpower. Do I need some support staff in this research? So you plan. Then after planning, if you are ready, you go to the field. You go to the field to do what? To collect the data. All together? After planning, methods, you have determined them. For example, basing on the target population. Because in the previous step, where you determine the scope of the research, you know which area am I going to collect information from. And therefore determine the type of the respondents or the target population. If they are educated, if they are literates, or if they are illiterates. Because you cannot use a questionnaire when your target population doesn't know how to read and write. This method will not apply in such a target population. Or you can integrate. You can amalgamate the two. You can use the two. You can use a questionnaire, then you use the interviewing method for those who cannot read and write, but they can talk and respond to the questions that you ask them. So it becomes really very important to study your target population and determine which methods are you going to use to extract data from the target population. So after planning, designing a clear plan on how to conduct data collection, then you go to the field. Going to the field, you have gone to collect data when you are well equipped. Methodology, financially, manpower. You have already set your clear plan. Then you go to the field to collect data. So the researcher here goes to the field and collects data from different sources, from different population. And remember, in collect data, you may also apply what you call sampling. You know what sampling means? Sampling method. You may use sampling method. You divide your population into samples, segments, and then you collect information from them. Sampling. We shall come to that in the next lessons. So after collecting data, there's this important step, what you call data analysis, which may be done using some softwares. So with data analysis, it's very significant. It helps you to take right decisions. For example now, if you had the target population, it consisted of maybe consumer A, consumer B, consumer C, consumer D. Consumer A has given you a piece of information. Consumer B, a piece of information. You have collected information from consumer C and consumer D. So when you put this data together, this information together, it forms what you call data. Now, you need to know what is the authenticity of this data that you have collected from these various respondents or customers. You need to study and analyze, is what A, if A has told you that you reduce the size of the product or you reduce the prices, B, D, C, then you have to put it together and see if there is some correlation. If there is some correlation. That's why in data interpretation here, analyzing data and interpretation, you may need to draw some graphs and see some correlation if there is some similarity. And you, based on that, you take some decisions. So data analysis helps you to take useful decisions or right decisions in the business. Otherwise, when you don't analyze, you may take irrational decisions, and which may cost the business. So here you must take good decisions, which may not cost your business at the end of it all. So when it comes to data analysis, this is a very important step that you must handle with care. In this case, you may use some experts to help you analyze this data so that you take right decisions, you don't take irrational decisions. Lastly, step number last is presenting data correctly. Now you present in two. What if you are the manager conducting research on behalf of the stakeholders, on behalf of maybe the owners of the business? You need to present this data, then they help you to take decisions or to facilitate decision making. So presenting what you call research findings, that is presenting data to relevant authorities like the business owners, if maybe you were the manager conducting research on behalf of the business. So you need to present your findings. What did you get from the field? And in this case, they will facilitate based on the data analysis, then they take the decision. Before we wind up this lesson, learners, I have two questions that I want you to work out as a home assignment. You intend to carry out research about market demand for your business products. Describe the methods you would use to collect data. That's question one. Question two, analyze the steps in the process of conducting market survey. I expect you at the end of this lesson to be able to tackle those two questions with ease. Thank you very much for watching and listening. We meet next time in the next lesson. Bye-bye.